thank you all for coming. This is a moment of particular joy and an exceptional privilege to me. I'm sure you all know, you're all here, so you all know what the new Resonance program has been, project has been. Back in 1998, Dee Evans and I had an idea for an anthology. The pretty new startup Red Moon Press, less than half a decade old, had done a couple of anthologies, but we had an idea that, you know, there's a lot of poets out there who are really, really good, but because there's such a sparsity to the way that haiku publication appears, I mean, I might have something in modern haiku, I might have something in frog, I might have something in Parent's Nest that didn't even exist yet. All these far-flung things, I may have a lot of publications, but they're all over the place. And it was really hard in those circumstances to get a sense of voice from any particular poet. You got individual snapshots, but you didn't really get a collective voice from any particular poet. So the idea that we came up with was, there's so many good young poets that we really like to feature who don't have a book out yet. So there's no place to get this voice. What if we created a venue where we could gather these voices and gather the poems for each of these poets, put them together in an anthology, and see how that went. And we thought of it as a one-off. It was like, there's a lot of people we'd like to feature right now. Let's do that. It was a hit. Everybody really, really enjoyed being in the volume, and other people really liked reading the volume. And so we said, well, let's do another one. 2 years later, we did another one. By that point, we started thinking about this group of poets, not as a group of poets, but as actually a community. And the new Resonance community has grown in that time. We have just released our 11th volume. We have members of the 11th volume here who will be reading, and you've already seen their kaleidoscope reading, which amounts to 185 poets that have now been represented. It's an amazing thing. In 2009 in Ottawa, we had a new Res reading. We had this kind of gathering. And it was, I think, a tremendously moving experience. Not just for the new Res poets, but for all the poets. In part because it was an opportunity to gather all of our names together and all of our poems together and remind ourselves of those voices. So I'm delighted that we've been a lot of time to do a second new Res reading, and I hope it will be a tradition that continues on going forward. There are a couple things that we need to do because we are short on time. When we did that first reading, we had, at that point, 5 volumes out. So we had many fewer poets, and at that time they could read 5 or 6 poems, and things went fine. Now we have 185 poets to represent. We have an hour, and we're running late. What we'd like to do, and as a consequence, there are some things I'd like to ask the poets who will read here today to do as well. We have one camera. We'd like to make sure the whole thing gets filmed. So at the end of this, I'd like to ask you to come back after the memorial reading and before you go to lunch, back into this room, and I will film you individually. I think that's a better solution than trying to zoom the camera around as we proceed. It will also allow us to move a little bit more readily through the 185 names that we have to get through. The way that we're going to do this is we're going to go alphabetically by last name. I did get a request that we go alphabetically by last name in reverse. That was by Joan Zimmerman. Thank you, Joan. But I feel for her, but unfortunately, we're not going to do that. What I'd like to do is, if a poet is present, a new Res poet, I'll read his or her name. They will stand up and they will read 2 or 3 poems. I will also announce what issue that they came, what volume they came out of. If a poet is not present, we will represent them with a single poem, and Julie will be reading those poems. Excuse me. So, with no further ado, I'd like to start with a tribute poem to Dee Evans. Dee was a long-time resident in my house. He lived with my partner Maureen and I for 13 years. He has just moved back to the UK. He's been in Cambridge now for about 4 weeks. So he's not here with us. He and I would sit around the kitchen table, literally would sit around the kitchen table with little snips. I mean, we would get hundreds of submissions from maybe 50 poets, whittle that down to our selected 17 poets, and then we would cut up the poems and start moving them around on the table. And we'd have that pile and that pile and that pile. So that was our process for a long time. That process has changed because now Julie is the new co-editor.
And I do not live with Jim.
Yeah. So that's the process, and so Dee and I, and then afterwards we would go back and forth on how do we point this, how do we write the little blurb that we do that characterizes the voice, because the volume has always been about voice. How do we characterize the voice for this poet? And for those of you who are familiar with the New Res format, you'll know that that's always been a feature of how we present it. So, without further ado, I'm going to start with a poem by Dee Evans, and he was never a New Res poet. This is a poem from his book, Wood and Rain. Thunder, my wood shavings roll along the veranda. First poem, Scott Abeles from New Res 10.
The first bite is all I want. Wild pear.
Mary Frederick Ahern, New Res 10.
Autumn rain, deeper and darker, the taste of tea.
Melissa Allen, New Res 8.
Firefly, knowing I'll never be able to prove it.
Mike Androlchik, New Res 8.
In the fridge, a lone bottle of white milk, the potato and light.
Debbie Antebby, New Res 11.
All those changes to stay the same bonsai.
Susan Antolin, New Res 7.
It must have been the onion that started it. Evening rain. Psych ward. Out in the night air. My turn to fall apart. Curriculum vitae. All the years that went missing.
Joseph Salvatore Aversano, New Res 11.
Calling into my dream, morning birds.
Annie Backany, New Res 1.
Cat in the garden, untangling twilight.
Deb Baker, New Res 4.
Candlelight, your voice moves into shadow.
Stuart Baker, New Res 9.
Another talk that's only in my head. Summer rain.
Francine Banworth, New Res 5.
We let the wine breathe. Slow moving clouds.
Colin Barber, New Res 5.
Another first date. I fail again to be myself.
Janelle Barrera, New Res 5.
At the Poetry Guild, they ask if haiku is all I have.
We're certainly not any of the rest of us have that experience, right? Jack Barry, New You Res 3.
New Year's morning, starting the fire with last night's coals.
Robert Bauer, You Res 5.
Autumn sunrise, the scent of sage lingers in the prayer lodge.
Roberta Bury, You Res 2.
All day long, I feel its weight, the unworn necklace.
Brad Bennett, You Res 9.
Autumn sunset, a cardinal spits out the husk. Tadpole pond, a man holds onto his son's ankles. Sunset, an olive stone rings the bowl.
Johann Bergstad, You Res 10.
Spring sun, my boy tells everyone the same secret.
Johannes S.H. Joy, You Res 8.
Sandalwood, I perfume the invisible one.
Mike Blottenberger, You Res 10.
Winter zoo, a gorilla turns its back to the crowd.
David Boyer, You Res 5.
Wisteria, the you if you stay.
Mark Brader, You Res 10.
Without a word, the morning glories.
Alan S. Bridges, You Res 7.
Tai Chi class, the slow curve of a train's whistle.
Helen Buckingham, You Res 5.
Dozing by the radio, another hottest day.
Alan Burns, You Res 6.
Distant Virga, the ranch dog's eyes, different colors.
Sandra Burns, You Res 10.
Wool snagged on a pasture fence, my maiden name.
Yvonne Catalona, You Res 3.
Summer solstice, the cat asleep in the darkest room.
David Caruso, You Res 8.
Holy War, death by ancient literature.
Paul Chambers, You Res 11.
Goshawks cry, deep under the snow, the road turns.
Yu Chang, You Res 1.
Gathering light at the tip of an acorn, yesterday's rain.
Joyce Clement, You Res 7.
Nighttime in the hospice aquarium, the pulse of fish gills.
Kirsten Cliff, You Res 8.
Wind gust, the letter was not meant for me.
Glenn Coates, You Res 6.
Swallows at dusk, the way her hands propel the story.
Kathy Lepard Cobb, You Res 3.
Spring sky, the unfocused stare of a newborn.
Pamela Connor, You Res 1.
Heat wave, the grave digger lays his lunch on white marble.
Susan Constable, You Res 6.
My umbrella changes its tune, winter rain.
Jennifer Corby, You Res 7.
Scent of crabapple, I let the wind have its way.
Aubrey Cox, you res 8.
Yellow leaf, simply trying to stay afloat.
John Crook, you res 2.
Summer solstice, the sun reaches a new place on the fridge.
Michael Cross, you res 2.
Summer evening, the old windmill stirs the stars.
Catherine Cudney, you read 4.
Sunlight through a snail shell and the snail.
Bill Cullen Jr., you res 4.
Shell fossil, I listened to the sea from long ago.
Devar Dahl, you res 3.
The road home, swallows fly out both sides of the bridge.
Ann L.B. Davidson, you res 4.
On the phone, my daughter and I watch different sunsets.
Ian Daw, you res 4.
Cracked mirror, part of my face falls through.
Bill Deegan, you res 10.
Auctioneer's chant. A rhythm in the handmade quilt. Heat wave. Pigeons work the puddle behind the falafel truck.
Christian Deming, you res 6.
Alone now, no ruby slippers to take me home.
Bruce Detrick, you res 2.
On chemo, watching my visitors eat the box of chocolates.
Susan Diridoni, you res 8.
The grain in his song tessellating the night.
Connie Dalmacott, you res 4.
Potting shed, the scattered leaks of sunlight.
George Dorsky, you res 3.
Crow in a cornfield, so much to do.
Curtis Dunlap, you res 5.
Cycling with my son. This is the year I fall behind.
David Elliott, you res 1.
The hike slows to a halt. Wild raspberries.
Jean Emmerich, you res 2.
A weed in her garden. I stay my hand.
Efren Estevez, you res 4.
Long after, the child's bicycle wheel still turning.
Judson Evans, you res 2.
Summer thunder, slow knit of bone beneath the cast.
Claire Everett, you res 9.
Fiddleheads uncoiling all the time in the world.
Shannon Forbes, you res 8.
Nest bright with a cardigan you left behind.
Lauren Ford, you res 7.
Distant thunder, the future in my bones.
Alice Frampton, you res 3.
Wishing fountain outside the cancer clinic. Some heads, some tails.
Terry L. French. You res 11.
At the border of a repressed memory, gardenia blossoms. Cowbird's song, the adopted child brought home. Knit 1, purl 2, grandma lets the secret slip.
Joshua Gage. You res 11.
Summer heat, the frayed embroidery on her jeans.
Chase Gagnon. You res 10.
Busted knuckles, my father's blood mixing with mine.
Jack Galmans. You res 4.
Under the pier, the sea roars in. A woman, a man.
Brenda Gannon. You res 4.
After the funeral, slipping my bare feet into Dad's old shoes.
Barry George. You res 2.
Spelling test. The teacher's squeaky shoes.
Beverly George. You res 4.
Train tunnel. The sudden intimacy of mirrored faces.
V. Giesecke. You res 1.
After joining our Malamute's howls, all of us feeling fresh.
Robert Gilliland. You res 1.
Autumn wind, a brown bag still holding the bottle's shape.
Kate S. Godsey. You res 9.
All day sensing the plums ripen. It's you, again.
Brent Goodman. You res 11.
Snowy owl swivels her gaze backward. End of winter. First crocus. My worn blue jeans wet in the knees. Tuning by ear the old acoustic October snow.
Chris Gordon. You res 1.
I buy another book about non-attachment.
David Grayson. You res 6.
Halloween party. After a few drinks, the mask come off.
Andrea Grillo. You res 6.
Late night at the laundromat. Stories still unfolding.
Kay Grimness. You res 3.
Thunderhead. A massive starling splits in two.
Carolyn Hall. You res 2.
Hand in hand, how slowly the creek meanders.
Jeffrey Harpan. You res 3.
Piercing cold, I force the rusty hinge.
Michelle Harvey. You res 8.
Rainbow after rain, the bridge the jumper chose.
John Hawk. You res 8.
All that could be summer clouds.
Tia Haynes. You res 11.
Last day of school. Chalk dust clings to the sunshine. Fall drizzle. Wiping my hands after the final dish. Pressed flower. A memory I've forgotten to remember.
Jeff Hoagland. Res 7.
January thaw, the renewed vows of wild geese. Waterfall, her body shaped by water.
Paul Har, New Res 6.
The talk we had to have, early dusk.
Mark Hollingsworth, New Res 4.
Nursing home, the feel of the handrail.
Kara Holman, New Res 9.
Hospice ward, the click of the door behind me.
Elizabeth Howard, New Res 1.
Mountain evening, a raven sweeps down the spill of daylilies.
John Hidden, New Res 3.
Shadow of the coffin longer than the grave.
Keiko Izawa, New Res 5.
Ice skating into his hand my whole weight.
Duro Jaye, New Res 7.
6-year anniversary. Her God stronger than mine.
Jennifer Jensen, New Res 1.
Cluster of berries beyond my fingers, clear blue sky.
Jürgen Johansson, New Res 6.
A ladybug, C5 to B4.
PMF Johnson, New Res 9.
Coyote howling for both of us, summer night.
Colin Stewart Jones, New Res 7.
Honey drips that would satisfy all. How sweet the rock.
Elmadin Kadrich, New Res 10.
Her origami bird I learned by unfolding.
Kirsty Karkow, New Res 3.
Alone again. The last raspberry sharp on my tongue.
Arsenjit Kaur, New Res 1.
Church bells. Another car parks illegally.
Bill Kenny, New Res 5.
Groundbreaking. A construction worker picks his nose. New neighbor. I wonder how old she thinks I am. Great oak. Not as tall as I used to be.
Michael Ketchek, New Res 1.
High morning mist. Only the roller coaster rises above the trees.
Debbie Kalaji, New Res 4.
Christmas light test. Trying to untangle last year.
Robert Cush, New Res 2.
Not knowing their names, not wanting to. A day of tall trees.
Marcus Larson, New Res 5.
Autumn colors. We let mother lie about our childhood.
Jessica Malone Latham.
Crown of thorns. Things we make with our hands.
Catherine J.S. Lee, New Res 7.
Falling leaves. The clang of horseshoes in the crisp air.
Franks Liliadol, in Res 10.
Distant thunder, the memories of my father all worn out.
Rebecca Lilly, in Res 2.
Autumn evening, yellow leaves cover the plot reserved for me.
Eric Linsbach, in Res 7.
Lightning flash, counting the seconds, slower than my son.
Burnell Libby, New Res 1.
A lure reeled through pads, August afternoon.
Chenu Yu, New Res 7.
A deceased friend taps me on the shoulder, plum blossoms falling.
Gregory Longenecker, New Res 9.
Music box somewhere inside yesterday.
Eve Lockring, New Res 6.
Super bloom poppies, trend-jacked, insus, Instagram bling.
Read that one again.
Super bloom poppies, trend-jacked, insus, Instagram bling.
Bob Lucky. Bob Lucky following Eve Lockring. In
Cool.
Res 6.
Cold drizzle, a goodnight kiss on my bald spot.
Paul M., also known as Paul Miller, in Res 2.
Owl call, the coldness of gloves outside overnight.
Anna Morris, in Res 11.
Above all, skylark.
Scott Mason, in Res 6.
Sidewalk Cafe. On the list of specials, yellow tree pollen. How deer materialize. Twilight. Late December evening. A foxtail tapers to nothing.
Dan McCullough, New Res 3.
Spring rain, the owl pellet releases its bones.
Tanya McDonald, New Res 7.
The glances we share on the packed train. Swallow flight. Crescent moon, shallowing my breaths to hear the owl. Kestrel on an updraft, some of her ashes don't scatter.
Joe McKeon, New Res 10.
Retirement party. The cake knife slices through my name. The Christmas after we told them. Artificial tree. Flag draped casket. 3 volleys fill the air with sparrows.
Jonathan McCown, New Res 9.
Giving moss a place to gather, gully stones.
John McManus, New Res 8.
Freshly baked bread, the face of a starving child fills my TV.
Scott Metz, New Res 5.
First spring bird, she says it before I do.
Fonda Bell Miller, New Res 7.
Refusing to be forced for Cynthia.
A.C. Messias, New Res 1.
Park chessboard, rain caught in the missing squares.
Ben Molerga, New Res 9.
Wishbones, the way we split in two.
Beverly A. Cuff, Lomoy, New Res 9.
My biggest fears are nameless, moons of Jupiter.
Matt Borden, New Res 2.
Mountain wind, the stillness of a lamb gathers crows.
Ron Moss, New Res 4.
Autumn wake, the widow's tremor in her coffee.
H. Jean Murtha, New Res 6.
Late warmth, a bee bounces around in a beer can.
Pamela Miller Ness, New Res 2.
After all these years, ankle deep in the other ocean.
Peter Newton, New Res 8.
Whatever happened, the star named for you, registered somewhere.
Christina Wynn, New Res 8.
Schadenfreude, the darkest dark chocolate.
Elliot Nicely, New Res 11.
Halloween, death takes 2 pieces of candy.
Ilona Oblak, New Res 9.
Trail's End, the sharp warmth of schnapps from a shared flask.
Fumio Ogoshi, New Res 1.
Spring bloom, a young girl singing beyond her range.
Bill Owen, New Res 2.
Origami done, she folds her hands.
Renee Owen, New Res 7.
Needing no permission, sky blue lupin.
Roland Packer, New Res 6.
As they were, as we are, starry night.
Tom Painting, New Res 2.
Snowmelt, the cascading notes of a canyon wren.
Brent Partridge, New Res 1.
A snowy daybreak. Everything's just different. Shades of violet.
Christopher Patchell, New Res 3.
Spring chill. For yes sounds like no.
Carl Patrick, New Res 1.
Fireflies. My neighbor has more.
Jackie Pierce, New Res 11.
Warm prairie breeze. The porter plays harmonica in the open door.
Paul Pfluger Jr., New Res 4.
Distant lightning. The feel of a scar.
Stella Paredes, New Res 10.
At last, the weight of my dreams.
Greg Pico, New Res 7.
If anyone asks, say I'm still writing. The narrowing road.
Thomas Powell, you res 9.
Sun-touched gully, the wool and bones of a passing winter.
Sandy Prey, you res 11.
Seed catalog, the colors of a winter daydream. Into the owl, a night train's whistle fading. Wind music, a willow trembles with sparrows.
Excellent.
Sharon Preddy, you res 11.
Redwood Grove, the parts of my life I leave unspoken.
Vanessa Proctor, you res 3.
The dreamtime world of stars and moonlight, powerful owl.
William Ramsey, you res 2.
Slave cemetery, I scrape the moss to find no name.
Dave Reed, you res 11.
Night winds, I let her go to voicemail.
Andrew Ryuta, you res 5.
Apple wine, is story better the second time.
Chad Lee Robinson, you res 4.
Prairie storm, the darkness disperses as buffalo.
Carolyn Rorig, you res 1.
Friend's wedding, at the church I become a saint.
Michelle Root Bernstein, you res 6.
Time shifting luggage in the overhead bin.
Dave Russo, you res 5.
Roasting a rattlesnake. We talk about girls. Old Beagle, asleep in the bluets. Distant jets. Out of the clouds, into our milk teeth. Strontium 90.
Dan Schwerin, you res 8.
Her name, the blue summer plate in my cupboard. Labyrinth steps. When your eyes let me in. Eggs in a shirt. To be here so lightly.
Rob Scott, you res 10.
After the lullaby, her slow breathing, a lullaby.
Dave Sargent, you res 10.
Lost in thought, a breeze I can't feel glows the embers.
Shloka Shankar, you res 10.
Meaning what you mean, spring rain.
Adelaide B. Shaw, you res 3.
Lost on a country road, cider at a stand.
Sandra Simpson, you res 5.
Skylark song, the name on her headstone almost gone.
Brendan Slater, you res 9.
Dad and I, when the sea became the sea.
William Sorley, you res 9.
When I was just a boy, I counted to 1,000 summer clouds.
Melissa Spur, you res 7.
Autumn love, I let him feel my scar.
A. Stefanik, New Res 1.
Alone, a downdraft still stirs the ashes.
Gary Steinberg, New Res 3.
Cold rain, my bones become apparent.
Lucas Stensland, New Res 8.
A bartender I don't recognize knows my drink.
Carmen Sturba, New Res 4.
Single living, I allow the tea kettle a full whistle.
Jeff Stillman, New Res 6.
Raging blizzard, the gritted teeth of jumper cables.
Richard Straw, New Res 6.
Dark shoreline, one last cast with the wind.
Andre Surridge, New Res 7.
Night match, the scrum leaves behind its steam.
Hillary Tan, New Res 8.
No play, watching the throat behind the mask.
Dietmar Tauchner, New Res 5.
A black hole amidst the Milky Way, our wars.
Hadar Shukov, New Res 5.
The pinhead, almost part of the butterfly.
Hansha Teki, New Res 11.
Last rites, I watch her eyes let go of me.
Michelle Tennyson, New Res 9.
Just please, how to forgive spring rain.
Scott Terrell, New Res 9.
At the end of each second, a little jiggle.
Angela Terry, New Res 11.
Deep within a grove of redwoods, the birth of the wind.
Tony A. Thompson, New Res 6.
Evening sea, I unloosen my tie at the pier's end.
Jennifer Townsend, New Res 4.
She tucks his letter into the folded flag on Independence Day.
Els van Leeuwen, New Res 10.
Moving day, a doll's house on the street.
Julie Wather, New Res 9.
After the last cherry blossom, leaves. Each place you've touched me ripples in the sand. Moonbeams, holding a picture that can't hold back.
Paul Watsky, New Res 1.
His ashes scattered. What to do with the box?
Lou Watts, New Res 11.
8th day. I blow Mum's skin from the pumice stone. 20 below. Talking fish pepper soup with the cab driver. Dust motes in a shaft of sunlight. We're losing her.
Harriet West, New Res 5.
Dusk, the girl we didn't like, with fireflies in her hair.
Dick White, New Res 10.
Spring. I'll be better then.
Billy Wilson, New Res 3.
Deepening snow. She leaves our atlas open to her homeland.
Jeffrey Winky, New Res 2.
Waking to the daily sameness, shoes neatly paired.
Laura Young, New Res 1.
Time to dig the sweet potatoes. Still no word from you.
Quendrith Young, New Res 7.
Salt spray, a taste of peat in my whiskey.
We could start over. Joan Zimmerman. Joan Zimmerman, New Res 8.
Finding my place in the Asperger's spectrum, winter rainbow.
Thank you to all the new residence poets. And thank you for all your attendance and your attention, and now you are honorary New Res community poets as well. Thank you for being here.